Wife cheated on me with best friend. What do I do? The flickering screen of my phone illuminated the darkness of the room, casting shadows on the walls that seemed to move with a life of their own. I lay on my side, staring at the messages from my wife, Sarah, replaying the events of the past weeks over and over in my head. Every time I thought about it, I felt a sickening twist in my stomach, a betrayal that cut deeper than anything I'd ever known. Sarah and I had been together since we were 20, fresh-faced and full of dreams. We met at a college party, her laughter ringing out above the music, drawing me in like a moth to a flame. She was radiant, her spirit infectious, and from that first moment, I knew I was hooked. Our relationship grew quickly, and within 2 years, we were married, our wedding a whirlwind of white lace and promises. Our early years together were like something out of a fairy tale. We were inseparable, spending our weekends exploring new cities, trying out new restaurants, and dreaming about the future. Sarah was my best friend, my confidant, and the person I wanted to grow old with. I couldn't imagine my life without her. But as the years passed, life began to throw its usual curveballs. Sarah started gaining weight, a fact that she was all too aware of. At first, it didn't matter to me. I loved her for who she was, not what she looked like. But as her weight continued to increase, my attraction to her began to wane. I felt ashamed for feeling this way, but I couldn't deny it. Our intimacy became less frequent, and I could sense her frustration growing. We talked about it, of course. I tried to be supportive, suggesting we work out together or try to eat healthier. But every time the conversation came up, it ended in a fight. Sarah would get defensive, and I would retreat, not wanting to push her further away. I felt trapped, unable to express how I felt without hurting her, and unable to ignore the growing distance between us. A couple of years ago, we moved to a new city for my job. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a chance to rebuild our lives and our relationship. But instead, it only seemed to deepen the rift between us. Sarah spent more time at home, her weight continuing to increase, while I threw myself into my work, hoping to escape the tension at home. In the midst of all this, my best friend, Mike, entered our lives. Mike and I had met just before I got married, bonding over our mutual love of sports and beer. He was the kind of guy who could make friends with anyone. His easygoing nature and quick wit making him a hit wherever he went. When Sarah and I moved, we stayed in touch with Mike, visiting him whenever we could. Mike and Sarah headed off from the start. They shared a similar sense of humor and a love of music, and it was comforting to see her smile and laugh around him. I thought it was good for her to have someone to talk to, especially since I was often caught up in my work. But over time, I noticed that their conversations became more frequent, their messages more personal. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind, convincing myself that they were just friends. Everything came to a head during a recent trip to visit Mike. We were staying with him for a few days, catching up and enjoying the break from our routine. On the last night, we had a few too many drinks, the laughter and music echoing through Mike's apartment. I went to bed early, exhausted from the day's activities, leaving Sarah and Mike to continue their conversation. When I woke up the next morning, I noticed that Sarah was acting strangely. She was distant, her eyes avoiding mine, and there was a tension in the air that hadn't been there before. My gut told me something was wrong, but I didn't want to confront her. Not until I was sure. The drive back home was silent, the radio playing softly in the background as we both lost ourselves in our thoughts. A few days later, Sarah admitted what had happened. They had slept together, a drunken mistake that she claimed meant nothing. She cried, begging for forgiveness, saying she missed the flirting, the chase, the attention that Mike gave her. I was numb, unable to process the betrayal. The woman I had vowed to spend my life with had slept with my best friend, the one person I thought I could trust implicitly. I spent the next few days in a daze, my mind replaying every moment of our relationship, searching for where things had gone wrong. I know I wasn't blameless. My attraction to Sarah had diminished, and I had pulled away emotionally and physically. But did that justify her betrayal? I couldn't find an answer, my heart and mind at war with each other. In the midst of my confusion, I thought back to the conversations we'd had about her weight, about our intimacy, and about her need for validation. I had tried to be supportive, offering to help her in any way I could, but had I been too harsh? To focus on her physical appearance rather than her emotional needs. I had offered her the chance to seek fulfillment elsewhere, thinking it was a way to keep our marriage intact. But instead, it had only driven her into the arms of another man, a man I had trusted with everything. I couldn't bring myself to talk to Mike. The thought of seeing him, of hearing his voice, made my blood boil. He had been my closest friend, the one person I could always rely on. And now, he was the source of my greatest pain. I felt betrayed by both of them, their actions a knife twisting in my gut with every passing day. Sarah and I talked, trying to make sense of what had happened. She promised it was a one-time mistake, that she loved me and wanted to make things right. But I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the image of her with Mike haunting me every time I closed my eyes. Our conversations were strained, the love we once shared overshadowed by the hurt and anger simmering beneath the surface. As the weeks passed, I found myself withdrawing from her, unable to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman who had betrayed me. I threw myself into my work, staying late at the office, and avoiding the painful reality waiting for me at home. Sarah tried to bridge the gap between us, but every attempt only seemed to widen the chasm, our one solid foundation crumbling beneath us. I sought solace in the gym, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the treadmill, a way to drown out the chaos in my mind. The physical exertion helped, if only temporarily, but I knew it was only a band-aid on a wound that needed deeper healing. I missed the simplicity of our early days, the laughter and love that had once defined our relationship. But I couldn't see a way back, not with the betrayal hanging over us like a dark cloud. I started to question everything. Was our marriage salvageable? Could I ever trust Sarah again, or would the shadow of her infidelity always be there, tainting every moment we shared? I didn't know if I had the strength to rebuild what had been shattered, or if it was even worth trying. The woman I had once thought of as my soulmate now seemed like a stranger, her actions a painful reminder of how far we had drifted from each other. One night, as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I couldn't continue like this, trapped in a cycle of hurt and anger. I needed to confront Mike, to hear his side of the story, and to find some semblance of closure. The thought of facing him made my stomach churn, but I knew it was a necessary step if I ever wanted to move forward. The next day, I called him, my hands shaking as I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring, his voice cautious, as if he knew what was coming. I took a deep breath and told him we needed to talk. He agreed, his tone subdued, and we arranged to meet at a bar later that evening. Walking into the bar, I felt a mix of anger and anxiety churning in my gut. I spotted Mike sitting at a corner table, nursing a beer. As I approached, he looked up, his eyes full of remorse. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. Finally, I broke the silence, asking him how he could have done this to me, to us. Mike looked down, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. He apologized, his voice thick with regret. He told me it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness that he wished he could take back. He explained that Sarah had confided in him about our struggles, about how she felt unloved and unwanted. They had both been drinking, their emotions running high, and one thing had led to another. Hearing his side of the story didn't make the betrayal any easier to bear, but it gave me a sense of clarity. I realized that the problems in my marriage were deeper than just Sarah's weight or my lack of attraction. We had both neglected our relationship, letting our issues fester until they exploded in the worst possible way. Mike's betrayal was a symptom of a much larger problem, one that we both needed to address if there was any hope of moving forward. I told Mike that I needed time, that I couldn't just forgive and forget. Our friendship had been shattered, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. He nodded, his eyes filled with tears, and I could see the pain in his expression. It mirrored my own, a reflection of the broken trust and lost camaraderie that we had once shared. Leaving the bar, I felt a strange sense of relief. Confronting Mike had been painful, but it had also given me a sense of closure. I knew that rebuilding my life wouldn't be easy, that the road ahead would be filled with difficult decisions and painful conversations. But I also knew that I couldn't continue living in the shadow of betrayal, trapped by the past and unable to move forward. When I got home, Sarah was waiting for me, her eyes red from crying. I told her about my conversation with Mike, and we sat down to talk, really talk, for the first time in weeks. We laid everything out on the table, our fears, our regrets, our hopes for the future. It was a painful conversation, but it was also a necessary one. We both knew that we had a long way to go if we wanted to rebuild our relationship, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a glimmer of hope. We decided to seek counseling, to work through our issues with the help of a professional. It wasn't an easy decision, and there were days when I wondered if it was worth it. But I knew that if we had any chance of moving forward, we needed to confront our problems head-on, to face the pain and work through it together. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah and I slowly began to rebuild our relationship. It was a long and difficult process, filled with setbacks and moments of doubt, but we also found moments of joy, small victories that reminded us of why we had fallen in love in the first place. We started spending more time together, rediscovering the things that had brought us together in the first place. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and our hopes for the future, finding new ways to connect and support each other. The road to healing was long, and there were times when I wondered if we would ever truly get past the betrayal. But with each passing day, the pain began to fade, replaced by a renewed sense of commitment and love. We both knew that our relationship would never be the same, that the scars of the past would always be there. But we also knew that we had the strength to move forward, to build something new and stronger out of the ashes of what had been. In the end, it was the love we had for each other that carried us through, the bond that had once seemed unbreakable, now tested and reforged in the fires of betrayal and forgiveness. And as we stood together, facing the future hand in hand, I knew that we were stronger for it, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together.